Hello and welcome to The Rising, a podcast where we delve deep into everything related to Freemasonry and particularly, but not limited to, Freemasonry governed by the United Grand Lodge of England under the District Grand Lodge of Madras.
This is episode 3, and as always, we host a wonderful guest. The conversation is led by Brother Rajan Narayan, along with a short interjection from Brother George Jacob, both leading members of the District Learning and Development Team. Brother Rajan Narayan will start our proceedings by introducing our guest. Over to you, brother.
Brethren, today we have the honor of listening to Right Worshipful Brother R N Menon, past District Grand Master of the District Grand Lodge of Madras. Right Worshipful Brother R N Menon needs no introduction to the senior brethren of the district. However, for the benefit of the younger Masons, let me say that he is a man of many accomplishments. He was educated in what was Ceylon and India and did his honors degree from Christ Church, Oxford. He had a distinguished career and was later a director of Weston Crompton. Went on to found his own management consultancy firm. He's also an author and has written many nuggets and papers on the craft. He was Right Worshipful District Grand Master from 2001 to 2011. Right Worshipful Brother, welcome to the podcast. And let me express our joy and gratitude for your agreeing to spend some time this morning with us. And we are sure that this podcast will serve to inspire Masons for a long time. Let me just start out. I would like to ask you about the time when you were initiated into Freemasonry. You have touched about it in your book, A Madras Merchant's Life and Times, but I would request you to elaborate a little bit on those times of your early days in Freemasonry.
Well, brethren, good morning. And it's nice to be once again amongst you. I've been missing you a lot for the last 12 years, I think. Followed your sort of continuing destiny, as it were, by looking at the reports for the district meetings and so on. And I'm glad to see that things are on course as I expect it would be under the present Right Worshipful Brother Theo David Ganam. Now, to give you an introduction as to how I got into Freemasonry, my father, I think I mentioned this in the book, came from a line of Freemasons of the past century or earlier. He didn't progress very much in Freemasonry because he came to it after he retired from Ceylon and was a member of Southern Brotherhood, I think, in Bangalore. And before I became a Freemason. So he worked on me for some time, and I said I was very busy, which I was at that time. I was trying to make my way in the company. And the thing is that most people find it difficult, but I managed to get my way around it. To attend a weekday meeting when you're working, by and by I had a secretary, Pauline, who stayed with me till I was director. And she used to block that Wednesday, the last Wednesday in the month, and not allow me to even speak about that Wednesday to anybody else, which meant that it was blocked out from my non-official calendar. Then my father, knowing that I was not very keen, got round a few, I think, Malayali brethren whom he knew here, Narayan Nair of Metal Boxes, I remember. Then Vijayan, NP Vijayan of Avery. They were both members of Archibald Campbell. And one day I landed up with a form to sign. Now, one of the things about Archibald Campbell Lodge, I think might interest your podcast devotees, is that it was a lodge restricted by bylaw since its founding in 1927 or 28, I forget now, to those who had spent a minimum of 6 months in either the UK or in India. So it meant that they had to be people who had resided in each other's countries and therefore knew something about the cultures operating in these two countries. Now, please remember that this is a time at which we were, as Masons, looking towards a separation of the English and Indian constitutions, which I think took place in 1963. There's a certain amount of distress on either side, because on the older side, the British or the English Masons did not want to see an old association go. And the Indian Masons wanting, of course, to have their own parish in which they could, vie for positions. So anyway, but these two proposals also had that privilege of having resided in each other's country. So I got in there, and I remember one of the more well-known, there were quite a few well-known Masons there, was F.K. Irani, who was then the chairman of the Cricket Board of Control. And also he was chairman of Spencer's. Along with him was one of the family members of the Spencer's group, John Oakeshott, who took a very keen interest in Masonry. And he was, I think, one of the founder members of Archibald Campbell. Then, of course, the famous Dr. Cherian, the ENT specialist, P.V. Cherian, whose wife became more famous than he, because she became the mayor of Madras, first female mayor of Madras, I think, and was also the sister of another Mason who was a member of the Archibald Campbell Lodge, Benny Jesudasan, R.W. Jesudasan, who was also a director and shareholder of the South Indian Export Company. So there were plenty of known figures in that. And there were the Khaleelis of the Khalili Mansion, etc., etc. Now, I joined, I think, in April 1968. And when I joined, John Oakeshott was my deacon who escorted me around and was the director of ceremonies of the district and quite a stickler for protocol and things of that nature, which is, I think, of some importance in Freemasonry, because we are guided by a lot of bands of protocol and past practice. So we did that, and then I got in, and I think by about in 3 months' time, I think the reason I had to wait a bit was that we do not meet in Archibald Campbell. We did not meet at that time, the 3 months in the summer, because this is the time that most went off home. And also a little problem about attendance in those months because people went off to Uti and Kodi, apart from going home. It was all structured around a particular culture, you must remember. The other aspect of this culture was that there was a very strict, what shall I say, adherence to the festive board. You see, unlike in some other lodges, maybe of other constitutions, where the main emphasis was on the bibulous nature of the meeting get-together, rather than on sit-down dinners, you see. But we were very keen on the sit-down dinner, and of course all the toasts being religiously attended to. And a certain discipline about sitting down to dinner by the latest by 10 o'clock in those days. When I was district grand master, I brought it forward to 9 o'clock, because by the time we finished, it would be around almost midnight, you know. And most people don't realize that we may be attending once a week, but there are servants in the lodge and so on who have to do this night in, night out. And it's not very nice for them to be so late in finishing up their work. So that was the initial part of my forays into Freemasonry. And there one learned a lot of the principles, or shall I say, the active thoughts behind the various ritual elements. For instance, we say first thing that we learn is where were you first made to be a Mason? And of course it says, in my heart. Now that is forgotten for the rest of one's Masonic career. Everything is driven by that one statement when you entered. And even as district grand master, I used to remind myself and sometimes others of this very portentous statement. To give you an example, there was a very senior Mason, as far as I was concerned, who was extremely good at ritual, extremely good at the history of Freemasonry and all that sort of thing. Very articulate. But I don't think he understood what it meant to go behind the various words of the ritual. Now, I've always, even when I was district grand master, a bit more particular about getting behind the meaning, like I just said in my heart, because this chap, I mean, he was, I think, fond of the sauce a bit too much. And so he ruined a very good career. He would have been a first-class district grand master. Anyway, he shall be nameless, as it's our wont in Freemasonry. And then when he had to finally retire from Madras and go somewhere else, some other district, He came to see me in my office, in my management consulting office, and couldn't climb the stairs and the lift was down or something. And he was very keen to see me. So I said, I will come down. So I climbed down the 6 floors or whatever it is and met up with him. And we didn't have the best of relations. So he thought that I might dodge this visit. But that was not the Masonic way. So I went down. And at that time, I think I was not District Grand Master, I was District Grand Secretary. But on the way up. So he said, I'm retiring now and you've been giving a pension of sorts to my wife. I don't know why we gave a pension to her, but knowing that the chap's addiction to the sauce denied her the rights to her share of the monthly earnings, we put her on that special list of being somebody who needs to be provided. Then I remember telling him on the veranda of our building that, look, Masonry is for life, you know. It's not, you can't take out your personal peccadillos or personal likes and dislikes into the giving of rights that a Mason is entitled to, right? And if you are entitled to a continuation of this pension or gratuity or whatever you'd like to call it, I'll be the last person to stop it because it's against my obligation. Until he died, we continued that. And I don't know whether you know now, apart from the fact that that case was satisfactorily disposed, because precedent is very important in Freemasonry. But mostly people use precedent for the wrong reasons, to deny something. A precedent should be used to give somebody the benefit of an obligation. So this he was entitled to. Who was I to stop it? It comes from general charity funds. Now that led me to an idea which in time, the thing is that at the end of all this conversation, I started to think about what happens to indigent Masons, you know, who are still, I mean, indigent in the sense that they're out of pocket in some way or the other, but they won't admit it. And we had a lot of problems getting Masons to accept our benevolence, you know, even when they were not sick.
True.
And as we all know now, I am now 87, so I know at first hand, it's not easy to grow old if you're poor. You know, it makes a lot of difference to have some money on the side. And you see, we are not insurable in the sense that past a certain age, nobody bothers about us except in maybe the immediate family. So we started working on a Masonic insurance scheme. Right? Whether we could contribute one-sided, that is, the district contributed a certain amount for each and every Mason, registered Mason in the district, and allowed him to call upon that corpus in a case of difficulty or need. Now, I remember we had a Mason called Worship Brother Varki, who worked with me on this. He was the next insurance man. He's long since gone. But we tried all the insurance companies and so on and didn't get very far. So we decided, look, why don't we fund it ourselves? Right? And but there should be one condition that I made as District Grand Master to the insurance companies or whoever was bound to take up this responsibility, that there should be no ifs and buts. A person claiming benefit under this should, under the Right Worship District Grand Master's direction or the charity president's direction, be allowed to claim it. You know, you can't say that he's not under this law or that law, you're not allowed to draw upon this fund, etc. Because then it defies the purpose of the whole thing. The purpose of the thing is accessibility and the availability of this fund for an indigent but well-meaning Mason. So that led to various things. I'll cut a long story short. But ultimately, when we couldn't proceed with the Cornwallis home and had collected enough money, and we said we should not in future claim indigence or poverty for not discharging our Masonic obligations. Is where that comes in. You know, it's not just an naam ke vaste thing. It's something that you have to see how you can really execute, despite all the difficulties, right, that the environment might bring on you. That led to pensions for Masons on application, which is going on today, I believe, thanks to the District Grand Master, present District Grand Master, in his generosity, continuing with it. So there are very fairly substantial sums now being given to Masons, and of their choice. I remember when I was, I think, on the cusp of my retirement order, one Mason claimed a medical bill of about 25 lakhs. He happened to go to a cancer hospital, it was expensive. But we didn't sort of budge on that. I mean, in the sense that we gave it some difficulty, but made it clear that people can't choose their expensive hospitals. One must go where the district thinks they should be going.
Okay.
But it's difficult to put down that as a law because, when somebody's got cancer, he's got your heart in the game. So it's not a question of saying, no, we won't pay. All right. But just a question of looking at his benevolence and seeing whether he really needs to do this. And of course, man didn't survive. That's not the point. Okay. Yeah. So it becomes an infructuous investment, as it were. So this is what started this off. And now, because the Cornwallis home, which was done at great difficulty and without continuing debt, incidentally, because that debt was some 13 crores, we managed to pay it off. But now we have got an investment of that kind. Any of you who can, must, go and see it in Bangalore. And now it's turned into some kind of a management institute or something. But it's still giving us a rent of, I think, about 6 lakhs or so a month, which helps in bolstering our charity funds. Because no way can we take shelter under lack of funds for not discharging our duties in charity. That's a principle which all Masons should observe. You can't say we're too poor, we haven't got the money. Charity must always have the money. And that is the administration's need and concern to see that they have the money. Very easy to say no. And in India, I think we should be all a population of women because we're very champions at saying no. You're not very good at saying yes. So, and in charity, in really expressions of genuine charity, there can be no. There has to be some way of doing it,
True.
So when we found that we were too early, I mean, this is one of my curses, that I sometimes come up with ideas that are too early. And therefore, this was too early for the situation in India at that time. So we couldn't find people who are interested in an old age home at that distance from the town, although we had put in every possible convenience. So, but then change it into something that is workable. Don't just put it in the bank and get deposit earnings. That's not our business. We are not in the finance business.
Okay, so that is what turned into Cornwallis home. Because you mentioned it in your book about the old age home and your.
Get people to go and see it. Yeah, I mean, I think.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't make the connection. It is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also in examining that idea, I mean, I have no problem with people examining it and saying whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But the thing is that it did a lot of things. First of all, it's the first old age home of that quality. The first to use solar power for certainly for this hot water, because for old age, I mean, the people, you need the hot water all the time, and it's worthwhile seeing, and for people to see what should I say, substantial effort in charity means, not just giving out 200 rupees or 500 rupees in scholarships. So it's to fund excellence. Now, in this case, it was excellence in the management of the elderly. But there you are. Similarly, what your current membership should more actively pursue is what can we do to show the monuments of charity, not just quoting figures that we did this, that, and the other. So there you are. I will stop there for the moment.
Right, Vishwamba. The other thing I wanted to this thing is you were initiated in 1968, but in your book, in the book, I can see the Masonic qualities which we, are with kind of foundation of our Freemasonry, you keep mentioning him out even earlier than that. Like, when you talk about Dr. Alexander John Boyd, who was the principal of MCC and who obviously had some impact on you, his values, honor, humility, or, the emphasis you place on education, even talking about your mother and how she placed emphasis on education. So these Masonic qualities were already there before you actually formally joined the organization. So did you find resonance in that when you joined the organization? Or was it something which, was inbuilt and, went ahead with that?
Well, that's why I started off by saying, what is the first word you speak in a Masonic lodge? Where were you first made to be a Mason? In my heart. Who placed these things in your heart? See, according to me, you investigate anybody, any successful man. I won't put myself in that category, but really successful men in the world, they've always had a very powerful, astute, and generous mother. Fathers only provide the necessary wherewithal. Let's face it, our gender, we just throw the wallet at whatever thing is requested of us, but it's the women who drive the values. You see, recently we had Mary Isaacs pass away, Mary Roy.
Yeah, Mary Roy.
And she was the sister of a chap who was just my previous alumnus in Christchurch. George, you're a nutcase. George Isaacs, the brother.
Okay.
He was both at Christian College and at Christchurch before me. I think he was a Rhodes Scholar. Brilliant as they come, but screwy,
Okay.
So, and he's the chap who fought with his sister and claimed the property in Ooty, and then it became this famous case, which fortunately Mary fought. You see, she didn't have to. I mean, she could have managed otherwise, but she fought and won that case, and we just benefited a larger section of the community, of the gender.
Right.
Anyway. So what I'm saying is that these are implanted in your heart by various people. If you want it to be implanted, you can always wear a corset around yourself, which does not allow such infringements of your original philosophy. But the thing is that these are things that the older educationist like Boyd understood, and he controlled everybody. I don't know if you have heard, but this is part of other people's history of Christian College, that when the Quit India movement was launched in 1942, the police were not allowed to come into the campus. Although the campus was in an uproar, this chap, Boyd, just asked his peon to bring a chair and sat in the main gate with a chair and a walking stick. And he said, you boys will not go out and they will not come in. That's it. One-man police force. Today, at the drop of a hat, they called for the police. That was the kind of moral authority and suasion he had, And I think I've written in the book, he came all the way from Scotland to Oxford to see me and have a cup of tea. And of course, in the meanwhile, of course, he had investigated my progress and all the dons. So he was much in advantage of me. Anyway, but that is the kind of interest they had. And when I came back, I wanted to teach. So I asked for a tutor's position. I went to see Boyd. And he said, Ravi, what we pay a tutor will not keep you in cigarettes. That was the end of that. At heart, he was, I think, a very, very good man. Very good man. In fact, he's one of my heroes. So anyway, and I think very largely, I remember my uncle, KPS, he had in the CMS college in Kottayam, I think the gentleman's name was Cherayan or something. I mean, he was this god till he died. I mean, because he guided him so well that can you imagine from Kottayam in 1919 to go to Oxford and the ICS. And even today, that his ICS marks have not been broken.
My God.
He still holds it, of course, long gone. But that's the kind of influence that people like that had on the young of those days. Today, where's the teacher who commands that kind of respect?
Right, Ashwin, I just want to talk a little bit about Freemasonry because Freemasonry means so much, different things to different people. For some, it's charity is what drives them. For some, it's the rituals. Others enjoy the esoteric learning. Some, it's the festive board. But for you, right, Varshu brother, what is the essence of Freemasonry
Why do you think I started with in my heart?
in your heart? Yes.
No other thing makes any difference. No rank, no guilt, no Bob Rose, nothing. In fact, till I became a district grand master, there was a prescribed uniform. We had no idea of what rank I held at any particular given time. And I remember Sudarshan, our lodge clerk, now I don't know, much grander than that now. He used to look at my jewel and say, "This is a jewel that's from 4 years old. You are not wearing your current jewel." Because that changes. You might remain district grand master or district grand secretary for months on end, but you must bear the current rank. And that I used to always forget because I never bothered about ranks. I don't know whether any of your members know that no one that I know, including the present district grand master, knows that he is going to be the district grand master until he gets that letter. So there is no jockeying, there is no politicking, there is nothing. You're taken on your record and it's decided in London on the basis of your record, for which every year the present district grand master has to recommend the next recipient of this honor, and it is an honor. So there's no question of because he went to Oxford or because his father knew so and nothing other matters.
Yeah.
Your record is what matters, and we don't build that record for that purpose. It is part of what's in your heart. If you don't have that, you don't have it.
The other thing we wanted to ask you about was, the world is changing. There's so many rapid changes happening all around. There's information technology exploding. There's even UGLE now has started, wants to make Freemasonry more accessible to people to increase the recruitment into Freemasonry. In this rapidly changing world, do you think that Freemasonry still has a big contribution to make this world a better place? How does it affect the modern world? How do we take it forward in the modern world?
No, first of all, I said, go behind the ritual, go behind the laws, and then you'll find that there is a tremendous amount of Masonic logic, which is what we use when we have to give judgments. Now, in this, since you have brought this up, there is a huge book, I don't know if it's still available in the library, called Masonic Judgments. It gets given by the Grand Lodge on questions raised on disciplinary and other matters. And there you will get a succinct argument as to why a particular law exists. So, for instance, why do we say on the level? When you get into the lodge, I'll give you a story on this. And by the time I was junior warden, I think I'd become junior deacon. And 3 or 4 years later, after joining, I had become a director of my company. So then I was suddenly on one Wednesday called into a past masters meeting. And I said, what the hell have I got to do with past master? So I was called in and I said, Mr. Menon, Brother Menon, one of your subordinates has applied to the membership of the lodge. Do you have any objection? I said, why should I have any objection? Nothing to do with me. No, but we have had people of your rank, complaining that somebody was taken who was actually reporting to him and he didn't like that idea, whatever. So I said, I'm sorry, I understood that Masonry is on the level. I have no business coming and telling you what this fellow should do or do outside the lodge. So the thing is, if I have a problem, then I should go. But I won't allow this. I won't allow a brother to be judged before he enters the lodge because he happens to be somebody whom I'm working with. It could cut both ways. So you got to find out for yourself what is the moral suasion which you are using to come to your decision. That is the Masonry. It's not the rule book. The guide is your own conscience, your own heart, and what you have actually learnt about the movement in your various interactions with it. So that kind of person does not need any persuasion to join the lodge. Rather funny story. We on a membership committee in the lodge, years later when we had removed all this colonial regulations and so on, one chap applied to us, and everybody who applies has a personal interview with the membership committee. So I happened to be on the membership committee. And this fellow, he came and said, what do you see in Masonry? which attracts you so much? He said, a lot of charity, lot of charity. I said, a lot of charity meaning? So he said, well, I'm also interested in charity. So I said, what do you mean by interested in charity? I'd like to get some. I threw him out. That is the end of the matter. You can see each person can interpret it in any way that they want.
Oh my. The other question we want, this kind of connected with this is, we have senior brethren, a lot of senior brethren in our lodge in the district today. What role do you think they can play in helping the younger Masons? How can they mentor the lodges? How can they make the lodge grow, as well as not stand in the way of junior brethren who want to contribute? How do the senior brethren get involved in lodges? After they are masters, after they become masters, how do they contribute to the lodge? What do you think of that?
You see, even in my time, I felt this very strongly, but I couldn't get it activated. See, there's a thing called the Lodge of Instruction. Now, that has been neglected, right? The Lodge of Instruction, is really a skeletal performance of what happens inside a lodge, and then where you can stop any particular part of the proceedings and ask for explanations. So this helps the younger brethren and the older brethren can take the chairs which do the explaining. And there is one person who acts as the professor in charge, who corrects people when they're making mistakes, etc. But this is an open free-for-all where you learn things by asking questions, which you're not allowed to do in a lodge. There is an actual regulations for the Lodge of Instruction, which is available with the District Grand Lodge. And I think your present, whoever is the big chief of that area, should get that and revive it.
Right, but just coming back to my last question. I've taken enough of your time, I think. You've been a Mason for 54 years now, I think. If you were to encapsulate your entire Masonic experience in a piece of advice for this new generation of Masons, what would it be?
Set an example, follow an example. That's all I'd say. You see, you can't say one thing and do another. Now, one thing that I would like to hear, who doesn't, is whether I played the part of whatever part I was supposed to play in a Masonic sense. Or, you talk all honesty and this, and then at the same time your fingers in the till. You see?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And that is our problem today in India. We say one thing, do another. You see, and there is a lot of room for honesty, probity, integrity. And Masonry gives you a tremendous amount of leeway to do all that. But who does? I mean, very few people do. For instance, I am the first and only District Grand Master or Grand Master rank who voluntarily retired. You're not, you can't retire. You're there for life, It's quite, so I had to get almost special permission to demit office. Because that's like abdication, It's like a sovereign giving up his throne. And also be very careful after one has resigned or retired to keep one's distance. See, very often we Indians can't let go of our parentage, So keep poking our nose into things that don't concern us at that particular point of time. So I never put my Masonic foot forward without getting a clearance from the present District Grand Master. So I have to do. Because it should not, unnecessarily muddy the waters.
Right, Vashul, brother, it has been a pleasure listening to you this morning. Just one question out of my academic interest.
Yes.
In your times, and probably half of my experience in the corporate world, we always had a pyramidal structure of working, and that's what we were used to. And so, therefore, when we came to Freemasonry, it quite didn't pose a problem for us to work in a pyramidal structure. Whereas right now we have even the chief executive officer sitting on the floor, and the organizational structure is very, very flat. So in this kind of scenario, how do you think youngsters would take to Freemasonry, or how do you think we can attract them to come in? I mean, there's a lot of resistance that we've seen in the current recruitment process. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think that you got to have an organizational structure which suits the objectives of the organization. Now, there can be no comparison really, line for line, with your corporate structure and what is basically in our case a charity structure. You must never forget that at the end of it all, the Masonic organization is totally given to charity. If it does not do its bit for charity, it is not really functioning in the proper ambit that's been created for it. So I don't think these comparisons are good. But at the same time, I have run corporate things, but with a structure that I create around my own personality. One always does, but one must admit that. And I remember one chap asking me, because you see, I was the youngest director in forever. So I think he wanted to get a rise out of me. So he was, of course, from Kerala. And he came up to me one day, older than me. And a very smart chap otherwise. And he said, what should I call you? Mr. Menon, Sir, Menon, Ravi, whatever. I said, you call me whatever you think is appropriate. It's not for me to tell you. By that, I know what he thinks of me. Thereafter, he called me Sir all through his life. These are all things that are meant to sort of tickle your ego a bit and see how you react. And there's always been a resentment, I would say, about good fortune.
Thank you so much, Right Worshipful Brother, to take. You have taken so much of your time. Thank you for coming. Thank you for addressing the thing. And frankly, this conversation has been very short. Love to talk with you some other time also, catch up with so many anecdotes, so many stories for you to tell. So, but thank you very much for joining us today.
Not at all. I'm always available for any Masonic duty, which I'll discharge with pleasure.
On that note, thank you to our wonderful guest. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. We look forward to having you with us again on the next episode of The Rising. Till then, this is Rohit Roy signing off. Farewell, brethren.